Attention, attention.
Good evening. I call the meeting of Apache Junction's Park and Recreation Commission to order on Wednesday, March 1st at 6 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carol, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner D.L. Kine.
Here.
Commissioner Cheryl Bigelow. Absent. Commissioner Judy Bory. Here. Commissioner Terrell Moore is excused. Vice Chair Heather Muller.
Here.
Chairman Frank Shanebeck.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Carol. The commission at this time may take single action on any or all items listed as consent agenda items. Any member of the commission may remove any item from the consent agenda for discussion and cause a separate vote on the matter later in the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I motion. Oh, I apologize. Is it the top one? Okay, I'm so sorry. I move that the Parks and Recreation Commission accept the agenda as presented and approve the minutes from the February 8th, 2023 regular meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Carol, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Vice Chair Heather Muller.
Yes.
Commissioner D.L. Kine.
Yes.
Commissioner Cheryl Bigelow is absent. Commissioner Judy Bory.
Yes.
Commissioner Terrell Moore is excused. Chairman Frank Shanebeck.
Yes.
Thank you. Approval is unanimous.
Thank you. Do any commissioner members have something they'd like attended and have something to share? Starting with you, Judy.
Well, we sold out of rodeo tickets at the chamber, almost a week and a half before the rodeo. And we also sold out of our carnival tickets, too. So, I mean, it was well received by the community.
Okay, thank you. Deely?
The weather hates me. I attempted yet again to hike Silly Mountain, and it happened to be the Sunday that it rained. Also the day that I was going to do Lost Dutchman Days. So the weather and I are not getting along. So if Arizona can just get its act together and we can have summer here. I know I usually say the winter's been nice, but now with winter with asthma, I will go do the activities in the summer now when my lungs are great.
All right. Well, we're hoping Silly Mountain will accept you someday.
One day.
What's up, Heather?
I did pop on by that wellness event on the 18th. I know that you had said that it was going to be a more condensed amount of booths, but I feel like there was a lot of traffic. Like, I felt like there was a really good group of people and crowd that was flowing through.
Thank you. I went too, and I had the same impression, that it looked like might have been condensed, but it was condensed well, and it seemed to be well received. It didn't look out of the ordinary. Right. It looked fine. I also went to Lost Dutchman, both the race, got to meet some interesting people at the race, and went to the Lost Dutchman event itself. So it was both of them are pretty interesting.
Oh, and that float for AJ Parks and Rec in the parade was amazing.
Well, this was the year I didn't go to the parade, but I went to the fairgrounds for the first time. I should have gone to the parade. Probably a subject we'll talk about a little bit later.
Very busy, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Director Lagenbach, do you please give your staff report, and then Superintendent Sullivan will present hers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Shanebeck. So I just have a quick report on parks. This month is going to be really busy. All of our new amenities are coming in pretty much this month. So let's see. Superstition Shadows, I think I shared last time that they were close to being complete. So the tennis team is on all 6 courts right now at the newly done tennis courts. They are just wrapping up the lighting. And so one side has finished lighting, and then the other side will be ready. Supposed to be this week, but again, the rain has caused us a lot of delays here and there. So if if nothing else, it'll be early next week. And so we were waiting to open it to the public until all the lighting is up and ready to go. Right now, only the high school tennis team is on them as we finish those last steps.
Have they been able to stay on schedule as far as their season goes?
Yeah, so they were able to have their first meet, super excited. They think it looks beautiful. We have our Porta-John trailer out there now, so it's a little nicer than regular Porta-Johns while we wait for the restrooms that'll be coming in, hopefully summer or fall.
Pretty neat, new track.
Yeah, I know,
Additional,
they're
so it's
getting
been a
all
good
kinds of
year.
new things. And then Silly Mountain, in the month of, or starting next week, we're gonna be having both of our big amenities are coming in. So the shelter, the Ramada, will be right at the very front entrance, a little ways up the trail. That is getting installed March 6th through the 10th. Somewhere in those days, it'll be a couple days. It will not prevent people from being able to utilize the trail or have access. And then the vault restroom is also being installed next week at the same time. So kind of where the Porta-John is right now, that'll get moved, the vault restroom will come in, and then they'll pull out the Porta-John after it's up and running. So by next weekend, hopefully, a week from this weekend, everything should be up and running over at Silly Mountain, and we're really excited for that.
Be ready for you.
I'm putting it on the book.
I know, see, it'll be just in time for you,
So it'll
Dee.
just rain right then.
That's right. And then at Prospector Park, as you know, we have a new large playground structure, so we're taking out the old playground structure that's 30-plus years old, and have a neat new feature that's gonna be going in. That was a partially grant-funded, and that will be installed at the end of the month. So it's scheduled right now for March 27th through the April 4th, for them to come in, take out the old stuff, put in the new one, and then add all of the ADA compliant wood chips.
You're gonna do that all in-house with in-house labor, or you're gonna have
No,
contract?
no, it has to be professionally installed for our warranty and for safety. Our guys will help to get out they'll help with a lot of clearing and things like that, but no, it'll definitely be done by the contractor.
Otherwise be overwhelmed.
Yeah. So a lot of other projects going on right now. We've got a lot of different restroom and just, I shouldn't say minor, but minor compared to some of these bigger projects going on right now. And so we're looking forward to a good spring. Any questions on park updates?
Dog park? Have we considered adding any fill to that?
So at the dog park, they will be in March doing we're not sure yet whether they're going to shut down or rotate or how we're going to do it, but in spring, March, April-ish timeframe, our maintenance staff will actually be doing some different types of drainage there. They're going to be adding a few, and then they'll be doing a seeding for summer grass because so much washed away. We really didn't get that good fabric early on, due to all of the flooding and all of the rains that had happened. So they'll be getting in and getting a little bit more attention on it this spring. And then we will not be overseeding next fall, mainly because we need it to get the big pad. So we really need it to establish for a little bit. So won't be overseeded for the fall as we go. So,
We had
yep.
a great
And-
winter for the medium strip, but not so good for the dog park.
Yeah, we haven't had to do any hand watering of the median since we installed that, so that's been great. Anything else in parks? Okay,
Anybody?
all right. Jamie's
Here's
up.
Jamie. Well,
Here's the amazing Recreation Superintendent, Jamie Sullivan, to present on recreation programs. You're welcome.
All right, so I didn't narrate my own video this time. I just have some pictures to play while you guys listen to me. Okay, so good evening, Parks and Rec Commission. We have successfully started recruitment for our summer recreation programs. And when I say successful, I mean that we've gotten more applications than we did at this time last year. So we have more returning. We're seeing more returning lifeguards and SI. So we're super, and SI, the swim instructors, we're super excited about that, but we still do have a long road to go to be able to build back up where we want to be. So I hope to be able to bring back some more information in April, or possibly right at the beginning of May, but you guys will hear when everyone else does, if not a little bit before, what those pool hours are going to be, because I know that that's kind of that question of being able to get it open longer, and we're confident that we're going to be able to do that. February hosted 2 very large events, community events. Both of them are partnered events. Thankfully, we don't do them all on our own. Lost Dutchman Marathon, which a lot of you guys had mentioned, and then the second was Lost Dutchman Days. A few interesting facts about the Lost Dutchman Marathon. Most of you probably already know that all of the proceeds received from the runner fees go back into the race, or they go back into our local nonprofit organizations. That's very rare to find. Even though we have a small race, I still think it's very rare that you find that 100% of the proceeds are going back into the race or the community itself. A couple of fun things. We had a 14-year-old actually complete the marathon. It was his second marathon. We had over 2,400 runners. It was a perfect day temperature-wise. And there was very little, or if not any, real major incidences, at least none to the runners, which is always how they're well handled. Our winner for the full marathon, I did try to get his time so I could share that with you. This is the second time he's run this race. I call him Mr. Colorado because I don't know his real name, but I know that he comes in from Colorado. And when you watch him run, it's as if his feet don't even touch the ground. On that same weekend was the wellness event. It made its first comeback after COVID. It's the only event that kind of struggled, but it did come back in full force. We brought it back to a smaller room so it would feel very full, which it did. We had 30 different community partners that was at that event, and we had 7 on the waiting list. So our goal is to get it back into the gym, and I think we're going to be able to do that. Pairing it with the marathon was a great fit because all of those folks coming to pick up their bags also then ventured over into the wellness event. We hosted our first ever Art Olympics. We partnered with the Superstition Arts and Cultural Alliance on that. They had done it in other locations before, but they were happy to bring it to the Multi-Gen Center. We had 35 kids who participated, and they learned in different art mediums. And SACA has already asked and requested to book for next year, so we'll be moving it to September. We had over 500 participants in our MGC special interest programs and our drop-in programs for the month of February. So now it is officially March. It is one of my favorite months because it's packed with most of my favorite events. We start the month off with rock painting this Friday from 5:30 to 8 p.m. at the Multi-Gen Center. It's free, so you guys can come rock paint with me if you want. Then our family campout will be at Prospector Park. We are taking reservations until Thursday. If you want to just come by the Superstition sleepover, around 3:30 to 5:30, they'll be out at the rodeo grounds learning how to do archery. Then back at 5:30, they'll be back at Prospector Park, and they'll be eating, they'll be crafting, they'll be stargazing. If you guys want to go, just let me know, and I'll let the coordinator know to look out for you. You can certainly come. It's just fun to see all the tents all set up at Prospector Park. It's a great experience. Blues and Brews is happening on March 11th. Currently, they have sold about 700 tickets. I believe that after Halloween, the next best holiday is St. Patrick's Day. I love that holiday. I think it's because my last name is Sullivan, but I also love the color green. We are ready to celebrate. We're going to go hunting for leprechauns at Silly Mountain, so you have a whole week to go out there and look for leprechauns, and I'm super excited that I have a shelter to put a few in, so that's going to be pretty cool. And then we have our Sham Rock at Prospector Park. So on the 17th of March, we go out and we put about 200 painted rocks out at Prospector Park. They have little shamrocks painted on them. If you would like to volunteer in the wee hours of the 16th between 6 and 8 p.m., I can give you rocks. You can just pick them up and go about your leisure and drop them off at Prospector Park wherever you want to. Or you can come out there on the wee hours of the 17th between 6 and 8 a.m. to help us hide those rocks. So we have lots of little leprechauns that help paint that. We get involved with the AJ Rocks group and the Boys and Girls Club. Dino Days will be on March 18th, and that event will absolutely blow your mind. The event is truly one of a kind with lifelike dinosaurs, Jurassic Park Jeeps, lots of bones to dig up, and lots of scavenger hunts for the kids to do. And then we finish the month off with Itty Bitty Olympics. This event is just for those little 6 and younger. It's held at Flatiron Park, and they try to do their best to impress their parents in various competitions, and the parents try their very best to remember that they are only kids. The event draws in about 120 participants and about 300 spectators. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jamie. Next is old business. Liz, present what you have, please.
Okay. So we discussed this at the last meeting. We are doing our code review items here. Give me 1 minute. We'll start with the first one. So today, pretty much we're just going to be discussing if there's any other changes or if we're okay with the recommended changes that we're going to be making. As I had shared, council had given us direction to be able to come in and make some of these changes for the various reasons that we needed to. And then next meeting, you guys will actually have this on as an old business agenda item to approve your desire for it to go to council. Joel, I know you said when I go to council and they vote on it, that has to be a public hearing. Do we need to list it as a public hearing for the commission as well?
No.
It can just stay as their business item and they vote?
Correct, they do a recommendation,
Okay,
vote, and
perfect.
then it goes to council because it's an ordinance.
Yes, perfect. So the first code change that we discussed is to the Parks and Rec Commission section. So Article 2.8, and all that we were recommending here is to remove the word secretary because we do not have a secretary and haven't for all the years that I've been here. So and while I was in here, I noticed that it says the Director of Community Services. So that was what our department was titled long ago. So while we're in here, we'll just clean that up as well. Is there anything else that you had concerns of for this item?
Anybody? Think we're good?
Okay. So that one will come back next month. And then the next one is our department section of the code, Article 313. So again, there's two purposes for these changes that we're going to be discussing. The first one is that there is a banner placement and supervision item that was in here that we no longer do. And as I shared with you at the last meeting, this will not prevent us from being able to put up banners at events or at our other facilities. This is specifically talking about those large banners in the median. We no longer do that as a city. So I'll come back to this section. I want to stick with banners. Really all it is striking out this entire language. So that'll actually shorten us up quite a bit. Very interesting that of all the things that we do in Parks and Recreation, this was given as much
Verbiage?
time as, yeah, so probably from the get-go though. And then the second item that we wanted to do here is that in order to be a Tree City USA and to be a part of that program, we had to have something in our code or an ordinance or something of that nature that would give the care and the maintenance and the management program of trees in our public spaces to an entity to manage. Well, our Parks Maintenance Department manages our trees. We do have a very extensive maintenance handbook that talks about how they're planted, what happens whenever they die, how they'll be replaced. We have all that in place, and so we just needed to have a place in code that gave official authority to the Parks Department. And so we just added a line here for assigning the management and care of trees. You can read that. and plants in public spaces. It's really important to note that we are not managing trees in anybody's private property. We're not telling people what to do or plant or how often, but it is for all of our public spaces. Yes.
Liz, does Public Works help to remove some of the, like the trees that have to come down, or?
It really just depends. So if it is so there are two separate maintenance areas for the city. So we handle everything that is landscaped, and then Public Works has all of the right-of-way and alleys that are not landscaped. And so, but there's trees in them at times, or native trees. So anything that is in their area, they will take care of. But our guys handle everything that's in the right-of-way. We also have a maintenance contract with Brightview. They're an entity that does all of our right-of-way spaces. So yeah, it's pretty much our parks guys that handle all of that. On a big windstorm or a big storm, that's one of our number one roles is driving through, and if anything's in a danger spot or a road, then it's immediately removed. But a lot of things are just put off to the side until the rain or the wind is over, and then we can get it all out of there. And then additionally, G in here originally was banner placement again, so we crossed that out. Are there any other questions?
Anybody?
Okay.
Okay, Cheryl, welcome.
We'll be bringing this back to the next meeting for your final approval to recommend to the council.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to new business, we have Joel Stern, our city attorney, here to present an update.
Woo.
Drum roll, please.
Oh, good evening.
Just a second, before Joel begins, some of us have been through this before, and it all seems repetitious and all, but it is extremely important. We are fortunate to have a reputation of honesty and integrity. We have that reputation. The only thing we could do is lose it. And what Joel presents to us is a way of making sure we don't lose it. There are things we could do by accident that we don't know about, and part of Joel's presentation will remove that possibility. So as much as we like to sometimes make light, this is very serious, and it has to do with our reputation, both as a commission, as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you summed up the first document. That's code of conduct. I don't think I have to say anything else. I mean, that was very, very good.
Thank you.
But I will put you through the torture, okay?
Oh, is this
We
close?
move forward.
Well, these were, although it says 2020 at the bottom, 2021, these were updated, so that was not removed, but these are 2022 documents, so these are updated. And I'm actually working on, there's been some more case law that came through, so I'll be updating those for this year also, because there's already been some things that need to be mentioned in some of these documents. For now, though, we'll stick with these. This document, and who's new on this commission?
Cheryl?
You are it?
I guess so.
Wow, okay, so you have not gone through this before, right?
I have, I'm on the library board
Oh,
too.
that's right.
Yeah.
I knew I'd seen you before. Okay, so I'll go through fairly quickly, since most of you, or all of you, have seen this already. And this code of conduct was passed by the council back in 2019. It took about 5 different public hearings to do it. It started out as a 12-page document, and they didn't like that, so it got moved down to 4 pages. And this is basically their work, their language. Yes, I wrote it, but they basically put things in here that they wanted. That council did. I don't know if they're going to talk about reviewing this again, but this is what does apply to council and boards and commissions. So I'm not going to read all these. Act in the public interest, that's a pretty obvious one. Comply with the law. Professional conduct. That one is really important. That one means they should never act in a matter where that means your impartiality might reasonably be questioned. They have a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party or representative thereof, a staff member or members of the public who support or oppose a party, or 3, they have personal knowledge of facts that are in dispute that would not be known by staff or the public at large. So the question is there an impartiality, compatibility issue? That's what that one deals with. Public meetings, due process, that one is pretty straightforward. It's just basically have respect during the meeting. I guess you don't get a lot of public here, do you? At least not tonight. So, and they obviously don't care about the codes because Liz does a wonderful job. So, however, when and if you have public hearings, people come and speak, be respectful and they need to be respectful to you also. And so the chair has the right and the duty to gavel people when they get out of line, and hopefully they don't. Doesn't happen that often, actually. If you have, let's see. Moving on to advocacy, do you lose your First Amendment rights by being on this board? Well, no, but you certainly can't go and advocate things and say, oh, and I'm doing this on behalf of the Park and Rec Commission. You can't do that. Interestingly, this didn't make it into this one because the law just came out. It was a Long Beach case, Ninth Circuit, so it went to the Court of Appeal, where it was a different setup than the City of Apache Junction has. It involved a commission that I guess each council member could appoint someone to it directly. And that person was that person's representative. And so I think it was involving a homeless commission of some kind or housing. And that person ended up going to a rally that was not consistent with the council member's political stance on certain things and was seen with an Antifa member. So that person who was picked did do a public statement saying, oh, I disavow being with that person. Didn't matter. The council member said, you're fired. You're off the board. So the members sued, believe it or not, even though it was not a paid position. And it went all the way to the Ninth Circuit. So it probably took 1.5 to 2 years to get there. And the Ninth Circuit said, well, yeah, you do lose your First Amendment right in that situation, where you have a council member who is basically picking someone to basically carry out their wishes on how they feel about political items. So that was an interesting case, and I'll probably add it in here, probably under the conflicts of law part of this, and you'll see that in the future. Non-interference with treatment of staff, that's pretty obvious. Gifts, it's still $25, so if someone offers you $25 or less, can you take it? Yes, and if it's more than that, you're not supposed to. Meeting distractions, this is like cell phone use. I'm sure everybody has theirs turned off. I haven't heard any cell phones. People are getting more and more respectful, I think, as the years go on that. Because they don't have cell phones anymore, they have a little watch that does everything. So, but those things still beep, so turn it on mute, please. Influencing elections, we don't have to talk about that this year because there's no elections, which is wonderful. Communication with litigants. This one you should definitely pay attention to. If there's a lawsuit against the city and you're talking to the individual who has sued the city, you shouldn't be doing that because they may use you as a witness someday in the lawsuit. And that has happened. So I would really recommend, if you know that someone has sued the city, you really shouldn't be talking to that person at all because they will use you as a witness someday. Other attorneys disagree with me on that, but I will say no more. I will move on. Criticism of staff. Don't criticize staff. They're professionals. You can disagree with them on what they're proposing. Saying, oh, Liz, you forgot to put, you didn't take out a comma on that Article 15. That's more of a clerical thing, but they know what they're doing. They're professionals. They are highly trained. They've been doing this for a long time. Please respect their experience in it. Attendance, I think we're okay on that one. incompatibility of office. Who on this commission is on another commission or board? Okay. Is it the Board of Adjustment? Anybody? Okay, good. Because that's the one that really counts. That's the one that, if you're on the Board of Adjustment, that's called a quasi-judicial board, where you are, in that capacity, you are judging what the Development Services Department director did, or you are looking over the law and you're deciding a legal issue. Whoever's on that should probably not be on any other board or commission.
Boy, I served on both for like 7 years. I got appointed to both at the same time, this one and Board of Adjustment.
Well,
But that was under Johnny Zalotko.
okay, well, I think it creates a conflict sometimes. Now, when there's no case, obviously there's no conflict, but that's kind of a difficult one to be on. When you're on this board, you really don't have any conflicts. Legal training, you're doing it now. And I think that's all I need to comment on the yellow sheets. Any questions? Okay, let's go to conflict of interest law. On the screen, it's like a mustard color, but in reality, it's orange, believe it or not. So I don't know how that happens, but it did. Basically, conflict of interest is, the object of the conflict of interest statute is to remove or limit the possibility of personal influence which might bear upon a public official's decision. The purpose is to prevent self-dealing by public officials and public employees. So it goes to the financial interest. What is being proposed is there a financial interest of the official? And there is a substantial interest conflict. That's the most likely one. So is there a pecuniary or proprietary interest by you or your relative? And if you look at the definition of relative, and it's on page 6 under H, I'll read that one to you because sometimes people forget it's not just you, but it's also your relative. Any individual within 2 degrees of kinship, including spouse, it's under H, child, child's child, parent, grandparent, brother or sister of whole or half blood and their spouses, and the parent, brother, sister, or child of a spouse. So it's pretty expansive what a relative is. So if your relative has a pecuniary or proprietary interest, then that disqualifies you. You should not be handling an item, should not be making a recommendation, and you need to step out and not even discuss it with anybody, and do not influence others. Why should you care? There's a bunch of reasons. There's criminal, there's civil penalties that could occur. I'm not going to threaten you with those, but they are there. Now, there is an exception called a remote interest, and there's A through L, and we've talked about this before. What's the most common one? Well, that's when there's a class of 10 or more. So you could be, like, say, someone comes to the city for a church steeple, and the church is a big church. There's 10 or more people in that church, so can the board member or the council member vote on that item to change the height of the steeple? The answer is yes, because it's a remote interest. There's 10 or more in the class. What should you do if you think you might have an interest conflict? You should call me first, tell me what the facts are. I could let you know if I think there is one. If there is one, and it's so obvious that you don't need something in writing from me, then what you do is you come to the meeting, you get the chair's attention right after the item is read, and say, I have a conflict of interest, I'm going to leave the room. And you don't participate, and you do not influence others to vote. You can go back, I think Matt's here, right? So you can keep Matt company for that item, and then you can come back in. Now, if it's a case where the facts you gave me, and I basically can give you an assessment, and if the facts are that you don't have a conflict, I will do a report for you. You can then, I'll file it with the city clerk, and then you can vote on the item. And that protects you if someone's accusing you of having a conflict. because sometimes there are close cases. And then if it turns out that I was wrong, you are protected. So you are not in trouble because you relied on a legal opinion under state law. It is appropriate to do that. And there are other consequences if you violate the law: removal from appointed office. Miscellaneous under anti-nepotism statute. Nepotism was when you have a person who is basically a supervisor of someone, and you can't have that in a situation. That creates a conflict, and we've had that happen with employees. And I will move on unless there are questions. Okay, the purple page, that's open meeting law. Well, it's blue on the screen, so make a liar out of me again.
I'm colorblind, you're doing fine.
That's blue. Okay. Public purpose, it's a public policy that meetings of public bodies be conducted openly and notices and agendas be provided for such meetings which contain such information as is reasonably necessary to inform the public of the matters to be discussed or decided. So you have this agenda, and it's detailed. Is it because we like to confuse the public with all these words? No. It's because it has to be reasonably apparent as to what is being talked about. So you have to have a notice. I'll get to that later, but that's why you have an agenda that is detailed. Why should you care? There's a whole bunch of reasons why. Some civil penalties can occur. You can be removed from office. When does the open meeting law apply? Well, it applies whenever there's basically a committee or a council that has a quorum. And you are an advisory committee of the council, so you are covered under the open meeting law. You have to abide by the law. There's some committees that aren't, and those are where the mayor and council didn't pick the members. That's like the city manager might have an employee benefit team. That's not subject to the open meeting law.
Joel,
Okay.
are all of the boards and commissions, do they have all consent agendas?
They can have a consent agenda, but
They don't have to?
they don't all do, no, they don't. The council does, as you know that, but you don't have to have it. So like for, let's see, minutes, that's on consent on your agenda. Yes, you have that. But some do, some don't. I think most of them, the bigger commissions and boards do have a consent agenda.
Is it to streamline the
It's to
meetings?
get through it quicker, so you don't have to have a separate item for minutes. And minutes, we'll talk about that too. And so what is a meeting? Well, obviously this is a meeting. You're all here, it was noticed. But if you start emailing each other after the meeting saying, man, that city attorney, his presentation was awful, wasn't it? And then you go back and forth with each other, and there's 4 or more of you doing that, technically, that's a meeting because 4 or more of you are communicating, even if it's by electronic means. Same with telephone. Used to be telephone, or used to be, I remember when I first started, they can't do anything about this now because it's too long ago, but planning and zoning, after the planning and zoning meeting, there'd be a second planning and zoning meeting. And guess what? There was no agenda. And guess what? It wasn't noticed, and it was always at the Village Inn. And it's like, really? And they're talking about the cases that happened that night. So I didn't know that was going on. I went in there for dinner after a meeting. It's like, oh, wait, what are you doing here? 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 There was at least 4 or 5 members. So I stopped going to the Village Inn, after P&Z meetings. But that should not have been happening. Because the law was the law then, too, that you have to have a notice of meeting when there's a quorum. And the quorum, and they were talking about the cases. I could hear them. It was That was terrible. So, it could also be by text messages, or tweets, or these little watch things too now. I don't know what they call that now, but, because you could be communicating with each other by the watch. What do they call that? I don't even know.
Texting.
Oh, it's still texting, okay, see? You can see how much I text. The flip phone I got rid of. Bryant made me get rid of it, okay? Don't make fun of me. I love that flip
I
phone.
love that phone, too.
Yes.
What phone do you have now?
Now it's a Samsung, and I barely know how to use it, but I do use it. When Liz calls me, I will pick it up. Okay, so now the notice requirement. This is the notice, and you have to have this posted 3 days in advance of the meeting. If you forgot something on the agenda, there is a way to amend the notice. There is a way to do it. Hopefully, that doesn't happen too often. You could have emergency meetings. Hopefully, that doesn't happen too often. And we get to call the public. I don't even know, you have call the public? Well, technically, you don't have to. The council doesn't have to either. It's an option. And I don't know if you even get people here for call the public. Probably not, right? Not in a long time.
Once a year.
Oh, let's move on
And
then.
we don't know what to do.
Then you time them for one thing.
Yeah.
For 3 minutes, and then you can't talk about what they want, but you can direct the chair to look into it, and then provide a report at the next meeting. But you can't talk about it, because it's not on the agenda, whatever they're talking about. That's the basic rule. Oh, wait, you can also respond to, they come up here and they just crucify you. You can respond to criticism, but not among yourselves. You have to direct it to the public. So there is that. You can do that also. Hopefully that doesn't happen very often.
I feel like it will now that you went over it.
It may, that could happen, huh?
But then we're going to be prepared.
Okay. Minutes. Well, right now, this session's being watched on the cable channel. It's being recorded, and Matt basically makes sure that these stay so that people can actually watch them. That's the minutes. You can do minutes that way. And there was a little battle with me and a former member of a commission. They insisted that the minutes be verbatim. So you have minutes attached to your agenda, and you'll look at them, and you could see that they're pretty light. And all you have to say is what was discussed, who made a motion, what was the second, and if anybody else discussed it from the public, and what the vote was. That's all you have to do for minutes. Well, we used to have a deputy city clerk who, for council meetings, was really good at taking notes and spent probably half her time of the week typing out the minutes. And yes, that is so convenient, and it's cool to have those minutes. But at one point, I was asked, does that have to happen? And the answer is no. And so that person was told, no longer will you be doing the detailed minutes, and you don't have to. Is it convenient? Absolutely, it is very convenient, because some people don't want to go online and watch these sessions. So I just wanted to point that out. I think those are the main things that I should talk about on this. So any questions on the purple paper? Open meeting, nothing? Okay. Parliamentary procedure. Okay, this is essentially how meetings are run. And we've talked about it before. Robert's Rules was the guide back many years ago, like over 100 years ago. Excuse me? Oh, it is, yes. Basically, Robert went to a church meeting. Didn't go so well, and so he decided, okay, I'm going to make a procedural manual. And that's how it started. That's you? Okay. Well, you don't have 100
That's
people.
how we are. We go to an event, it's like, this is not being ran properly. We're going to take over.
Well, so we're on the 11th or 12th edition now. In our code, our city code, it's supposed to be the guideline. Robert's rules are not perfect for cities and towns. It's really meant for fraternal associations, nonprofits, Congress to a certain degree, but not cities and towns. So I get to be the one who decides, do we follow those rules exactly? And we don't, because I don't think all of them apply. Some of them do, and that's under the goals, and this is pretty simple stuff. Majority rules, basically. Minority views, yes, you hear them, but then you make a decision, and then you move on, and you don't labor over it, and you don't get mad about it. There is a way to do a motion for reconsideration, but it has to be someone who is on the winning side who can do that, not from the losing side. And so then that item could be put on for a next agenda where you talk about, should this be reconsidered? That's the only issue. Should it be reconsidered, yes or no? Then there's a motion on that, and then it goes to yet another meeting on, okay, now we're going to talk about the substantive issue. That's how it's supposed to go. That doesn't happen too much, but it has in the past with council. How you make motions, pretty simple. I move that, or I move to amend. I've written out the more common ones on page 2 at the bottom under D. And then selection of officers, which you have done for this year already. And there's a script for that also. And that's a little antiquated, especially where you have to say, are there any other nominations? You got to do it 3 times. And I think that's because when those rules were written, they didn't have electricity, and so they had to yell out, are there any other nominations? And it could be hundreds of people in the room. We still do it, but we probably don't have to, but I think it's good to keep some of the old cultural things. Okay, now, if there's no questions, we go to the real blue paper. Now, that's not purple, that's blue.
Yeah.
And so's the real one, public records law. Public records and other matters in the custody of any public officer shall be open to inspection for any person at all times during business hours. The law serves to open government activity to public scrutiny. The core purpose is to allow public access to official records and other governmental information so that the public may monitor the performance of government officials and their employees. So it's all under Arizona Revised Statutes 39-121 and following. There's also what's called the Freedom of Information Act. That does not apply to cities and towns. The only time it does is when the question or the issue that is being brought up is not covered under Arizona law, and that is rare. People know that. They think, oh, I can get something from the city, and that I'll do a FOIA request. Well, they don't know. When they get my letter, I say, FOIA doesn't apply to us, sorry, and then they get very angry. What they really mean is it's a Arizona public record request under 39-121. Why should you care? Well, say you're taking notes on, I don't know, you could have sometimes Park and Rec has some highly, difficult items. Like, I don't know, naming parks. That's a good one. How do you do that? How does someone get a park named after them? When does Stern Park come up, okay? Do I have to dedicate 10 acres to you? Well, yes, but if I'm still alive, do I get that? And there's, those kind of questions. So you'll be taking notes, and you might be writing something to your fellow commissioner. And is that a public record? Yes, it is. Technically, it is. Any notes you make on your on your packet would be a public record. You're supposed to keep them. You're supposed to actually give them to Liz. She's supposed to keep them for a certain amount of time and we're governed by what's called the Arizona State Library Archives Department. And yes, they get to decide when, and they have a schedule of how long certain documents are good for. and when you have to get rid of them too.
And then if I could just add, so remember last year we talked about that's why you guys have your binder and all your stuff stays in there. Many of you give those back to Carol and she keeps them for the day or for the month and then brings them back. Some of you keep them so you can have them with you or go over documents, and that's all fine. And once you leave, we try to make sure that we get that back. So keeping that in mind as you go.
Joe, if I bring notes to the meeting, say I've looked at our agenda and I write notes down that I want to remember to bring up, are those part of that public record?
Yeah, those are the, they relate to the public item, absolutely.
Yeah, I did that at planning and zoning and turned them in.
Yep.
Okay.
So what happens is people want to see those notes sometimes. So what do? They do a public record request. This is just an example. So what happens? Well, the request goes to the city clerk. It's supposed to be filed with the city clerk. For police records, it gets filed with the police department because they've got their own system. Same with the court, and the court has its own statutory fees and costs. So what happens? The city clerk then sends out an email to the affected departments saying, we got this public record request, here it is. Please provide these. And I am supposed to get them actually, so that I can decide whether there should be redactions, meaning we black out what the information is. We take it out. If it's private or it doesn't apply, then we would do that.
Do they request an individual's notes? Can they request an individual's notes, or is it the whole commission, board and commission?
They could ask whatever they want, and they don't have to say why. So they can do that. Now, certain things are not public records. What is a public record? We've kind of gone over that already. It's anything that the city keeps as a business record or in the normal course of the city business. And that would be notes of yours. Private, say you exchange emails with each other. Are those emails public records? Well, if you're talking about an item that's on the agenda, yes. If you're talking about private things, no. But they have to be looked at, and it has to be determined whether they apply. So I don't know if you use your email and talk back and forth to commissioners. If you do, be careful with that, because if someone makes a public record request, those could be encompassed in that request. And then you'll have to hand those over, technically, to me, and I get to look at your private stuff. Isn't that wonderful? Now, there is an AG opinion out there, the Attorney General, that says it's kind of an honor system on private communications. So if an elected official or a board commission member says, I don't have anything, you take the word of that individual. If later it turns out, oh no, they had something and they had pages and pages, there's going to be a problem. But the Attorney General has acknowledged that it's an honor system, which I just find fascinating. And they are the ones that enforce these things when someone makes a complaint about a city or town. So I don't understand that, but that is the law right now. And there's other things that, if they are private matters, they're supposed to be redacted or not even given out. And there is some case law on that involving a Pinal County supervisor that basically was taking money from the till and spending it on an African safari. And that happened a number of years ago, and there was a case on that. That was, I think, Stanley Griffiths versus Pinal County. So that's it, and you could read the case. If you want the full case, I can certainly get it to you also. Okay, so what happens if the person's now getting very upset because it's taken too long to get the public record? Well, they can threaten a lawsuit, and we have had those. And then if they sue, and it's determined by a judge that it wasn't prompt, that's the statutory word, it has to be a prompt reaction by the city, or a prompt discovery. If we don't do it promptly, then we can actually be subject to attorney fees and costs. And that did happen once back in 2001, I think, involving, we had a shooting, and it was a tragic case where a kid was shot. And the city is in a insurance pool where the insurance company hires the attorney for any wrongs that are done, called a tort, to an individual. In that case, the shooting is a tort. So that attorney wasn't really too familiar with certain things and said, okay, I'm not going to give you the settlement agreement. It's none of your business, Mr. Requester. Or actually, it was the press that wanted it because they heard about a settlement. And the attorney refused to give over the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement had the dollar amount, and they said, no, that's private. Because in the private sector, a settlement agreement is private, and it doesn't even get recorded with the court. All that gets recorded with a court in a private action is, we've reached a settlement, and therefore we dismiss the case. But in the public sector, settlement agreement,
Public money.
and so in that case, it was $1.65 million. So is that newsworthy? Well, obviously it was, and they didn't turn it over, and so it was a Maricopa County case, unfortunately, and a judge ruled against the city and said, oh, and by the way, city, you have to pay the requesting party, meaning the newspaper attorneys, $30,000 in attorney fees. And that's what happened. So, now, I didn't withhold it, but the attorney for the city did, and so the city had to pay that. So that's what happened when you don't act promptly. So what happens when I get the request and I have a stack of 500 pages I have to now go through? Do I have to look at that immediately? Well, the statute says promptly. So if I'm endangering the legal affairs of the city by putting aside the city work for this one record request, no, then I can wait to look at that stack. But once the city business, the critical stuff is done, I'm going to have to start going through that. And that means Fridays, most everybody at the city get it off. I don't, but Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I'll be working on public record requests. It's happened before. Thousands of pages. So yes, I have to go through it. I have to redact certain information, and then I have to give it to the city clerk. That's how it's supposed to work. In some states, they say within 10 days. I think California says 10 days you have to respond. Or you not respond, but you have to actually have the documents. There was a recent statutory requirement that says now the city has to, on its website, say, okay, you want a public record request, or you want a public record, here's how you request it, here's who you contact, here's their email, here's their phone number. We have to do that now. Okay. There are some exceptions to what is a public record, and it comes down to, is there a statutory confidential exclusion? Is there a privacy interest involved? And there's a general catch-all called best interests of the state. These come from a police case out of Tucson. That's how that it was a carve-out for an exception. And sometimes you can say, no, we're not going to give those things out. And I've given you some examples with some cases. Anybody can obtain a public record. They don't have to say why. I think I said that already. And we can charge a non-commercial fee and a commercial fee. Recently, there's been some legislation where people would ask for a body cam footage. They want to see it. Well, there's some law regarding body cams. You're supposed to blur out children's faces, the police officer's face. That's in the statute. So to do that, there's software the city could buy. However, someone has to go in and actually use the software to actually do the blur outs. It's not automatic, and that takes time. And the city cannot charge for that time. They cannot charge for that service. They can charge for afterwards, they put it on a disk, and then they can give it to someone or on a jump drive, or they could send it electronically. Bless you. And so there's been some legislation that now allows a fee for that. for cities and towns. There already is one for DPS. They already got their exception last year, so now is our turn. We're gonna, and I don't know where that is in the legislative process. And at the end, they've given you some miscellaneous cases to read if you'd like, or the briefings on each case. And if you really want to read the case, I can get you the case, or you could find it on the internet, but I could find it also. Any questions?
You
Well, that was 45 minutes. I'm sorry about that. That was a little longer than I thought, but
It's very informative.
did well, did well. Well, that takes care of the new business. Call to the public is an echo. So call for future agenda items. Does anybody have any items they would like to add to the next agenda? Going once, going twice? Okay. Selection of meeting dates, times, and locations. I need a motion here.
I move that the Parks and Recreation Commission hold a regular meeting on April 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Carol, may I have a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Terrell Moore is excused. Vice Chair Heather Moeller.
Yes.
Commissioner D.L. Kine.
Yes.
Commissioner Cheryl Bigelow.
Yes.
Commissioner Judy Bory.
Yes.
Chairman Frank Shanebeck.
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
I adjourn this meeting at 7:01.